This is called Liberation Through Seeing. Most of us have heard of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, also called in Tibetan the Thongdrol, and translates as liberation through hearing. Now, fewer have heard of what's called Thongdrol, liberation through seeing. Thongdrol is maybe most commonly used as a term for the display of immense tankas, these sacred paintings that sometimes are made with cloth and can fill a whole hillside when they're unrolled. Just seeing them, it's said that they alter the mind upon seeing. So here's my story and my take on all that. And I've been beating around the bush with myself about this for years. I've kind of said what I'm going to say here in blogs, but just as often I dodge and weave about it too. And perhaps I embroider the edges of saying it, almost saying, but have not been totally aware myself as to its importance in my life. But I just found the Tibetan word for it, and with that it all came home to roost, like, it came in a flash for me. I suddenly got it. And this morning I wrote my last blog, which I've been writing lately, on transmigration and the storehouse consciousness, what's called the Alaya Vijnana. And I tried to put it in a very direct language and pointed out how relatively little I actually knew about it. In fact, the last line in this blog, which I will publish tomorrow, is, and I quote, "I've read all that I can read, and I'm practicing as best as I know how. It's time for me to put the books aside, take hold of the steering wheel, and let the rubber find the road." End quote. Then within a few minutes of writing that, thanks to a link from a Dharma friend, I found this this incredible short video of His Holiness the 17th Karmapa and others talking about liberation through seeing art, seeing paintings, and so on, visually. And here's the link. It's about a 5-minute watch, so do yourself a favor and experience what I did. I'll try to superimpose that here so you can see it. Anyway, after seeing His Holiness the Karmapa pointing this out in a video, it kind of flashed in my mind, and many things just came together. No sooner than I finished one chapter in my life, then this one begins to open up. Imagine that. So here's where I am at this very minute as I write this. As I mentioned, the word is Thongdrol, and it means liberation through seeing. Simple as that. Hopefully all of us have had a few spiritual turning points in our lives. Some of them, to me at least, were not little, but they're kind of major. Of course, there were some that were acid-induced back many years ago. They certainly started the ball rolling. There's no denying their efficacy. But the one that means the most to me, the one that charged me utterly the most, is less than 10 years old now, and it was pure Dharma. Of course, that's not really fair, because the Dharma practice that went on before this kind of epiphany stretches back a good 40 years anyway. Still, the turning point, which is the point of no return for me, was relatively recent. And it didn't happen while sitting on the meditation cushion, as I'd always imagined it would. Quite the contrary. I was outside in the woods, in the meadows, crawling around on my belly in the wet grass of spring and summer, just about dawn, watching the sun come up. Now, I've written about this period of change many times, so I'm not going to rehearse it here, because for most of my readers, it's not any longer news. So what is new, and why am I writing about this here and now? As mentioned, I was coming across that Tibetan word Thongdrol, the liberation through seeing, and instantly I realized that is exactly what happened to me years ago, and I've been kind of trying to hide it from myself because I didn't quite know how to accept it or how to name it, much less how to explain it to others, and now I do. Because liberation through seeing is exactly what happened to me back then. Of course, I'm not saying I'm liberated, far from it, but rather that this event was liberating, and it happened solely through seeing the beauty of what is. And of course, it's hard to put into words because it's a realization, and realizations by definition are ineffable. They're beyond description, beyond words. Can only give you a feeling of it. And what is noteworthy about it, and why I relate it to you now, is that after 32 years of fairly intense Dharma practice, with few results and some complaints on my part, this particular event resulted not on the cushion or even in the shrine room. And here's the point. It happened to me in the midst of what, ever since I was a little kid, I most love, which is Mother Nature, just being in nature with all its critters. To make a long story short, but to give you some background, which might help, I was raised in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, quite outside of town, in a house that my family built that was wedged between two large farms. There were no other houses around, at least in distance as measured by a little kid. And since I was the oldest child of 5 boys, to some degree I was always on my own. I can't say I was lonely, but I did have to entertain myself. I had no one to look up to, at least around home, other than, of course, my parents. And the only thing that was really abundant was nature. And since Lancaster is nicknamed the garden spot of the world, I had natural history all around. So I did, and I truly loved it. My mother was a fine arts painter, and when she was not taking care of her kids, she would meet with local artists as she could. When I was about 6 years old, she took me to a meeting out on a farm owned by a woman named Peggy Dodge. Mrs. Dodge was a dyed-in-the-wool naturalist, and she somehow, for some reason, took an interest in me. And her interest in me served as a catalyst or booster rocket for my inherent love of critters and nature. And so it went until late in my teens. Now, let's fast forward to this particular breakthrough some years ago, which was a very difficult time for me personally, because I had just been laid off, along with, I believe, a great many other folks, from my job as a senior consultant for NBC. Suddenly I was out of a job, which at my considerable age was not a little thing. So I drowned my sorrows not in drink, but by re-entering in true sincerity the world of nature that I knew as a child. I dove into that head first, and I didn't want to think, but I just immersed myself in the outdoors, initially armed with a camera. The camera gave me an excuse for myself and others to be out there doing something. But inside, I was reaching a turning point and a point of no return from where I came from. I think for about 6 months straight, if it wasn't raining or whatever, I was out in those meadows and forests and streams watching the sun come up. I was crawling through the wet grass on my hands and on my knees, taking close-up and macro photos of small critters and plants. Somehow at that time, these tiny natural worlds that I could see by looking through these fine macro lenses, I could see them in their perfection. Just seeing the natural world was deeply soothing to me compared to the actual more troubled world at that moment that I just would soon forget. And what I saw through the lens was awesome, and I threw my everything into it, if only because I didn't care about much else then. I was singularly focused, and something was happening to me. And here's the point of the story. Apparently, refinding my natural love of nature after all the years, not that I ever was too far from it, coupled with the intensity of my innate ability to concentrate, and looking through these pristine camera lenses, and in lieu of what was going on in my vocational life, which I wanted to forget, there was a kind of natural mixing of the mind, and it was exactly what the Dharma doctor ordered. Maybe something snapped inside, but nothing was broken, and certainly there resulted a breakthrough that took me some time to fully realize. All of my many years, literally decades, of fairly diligent Dharma practice responded that spring and summer and fall to the love of nature, the purity of my intention at the time, and the intensity of my focus, kind of like freeze-dried food responds to water because something blossomed just as a flower opens. In a rather short time, those 6 months outside that year, I realized for me the essence of what's called vipassana, insight meditation. And immediately all of the shamatha, all of the tranquility meditation, sitting on a cushion that I had done for over 30-some years, seemed to fall into place. I realized, and it just kind of lined up. I found a clarity and luminance that I could not even have imagined properly. And it never went away. I have it pristine to this day. This is what's called a realization. They don't go away. However, there's one caveat, at least at the beginning. For me, I could only have this clarity if I was looking through the camera lens at these miniature natural worlds, these tiny dioramas. So, instead of sitting on my well-worn meditation cushion, which was at the time at home and unsat on during this whole period, the camera and lens replaced the cushion as the means through which to meditate. Is it any wonder that every next day found me heading out somewhere around dawn, armed with my camera, and spending hours concentrating and looking at nature through these fine lenses? If I didn't do that, I found that my mind remained just as ordinary as it always had been. And I was addicted to the clarity and the luminous that I had found. Now, to sum this up, there are two thoughts going here. One, my advice, if you are struggling with meditation, if it's not coming easily, is to learn to meditate using something that you love, something that you can relax completely in and are used to relaxing in. For me, it turned out to be nature. And the second thought, which is perhaps more just for me, is that I should stop pussyfooting around about conflating Dharma with photography and just accept and declare that for me, liberation such as it is has come primarily through seeing and not through more, perhaps, traditional means. There, I've said it. And this makes me want to concentrate more on helping others like me, others who may be more inclined to liberate themselves dharmically through seeing in one way or another, through, nature, painting, music, etc. I've been kind of hiding this realization from myself and certainly from others. But it was like trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube. It doesn't work. Now, with that said, I plan to very much organize around this particular approach to Dharma because I can actually stand behind it and declare it. I have the experience and I have the realization to back this up. This is so much better than my trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, as I've been attempting to do for many years. I don't know if there is a particular lineage for liberation through seeing, but if there is, I'm a member of it. So there you have it. Up to the minute. That's me, and that's now.